Welcome to Permission to Kick Ass, the show that gives you a virtual seat at the bar for the real conversations that happen between entrepreneurs. I'm interviewing all kinds of business owners, from those just a few years into freelancing to CEOs helming 9-figure companies. If you've ever worried that everyone else just seems to get it and you're missing something or messing things up, this show is for you. I'm your host, Angie Coley, and let's get to it. Hi, and welcome back to Permission to Kick Ass. With me today is my new friend, Dr. David Pearce. Say hi.
Hey, Angie. Thanks for having me on the show there, kid.
Oh, my pleasure. This has been an adventure getting the show to happen. Sometimes as we are doing our pre-show walkthrough, like we got to fix audios. Zoom is being a beast today. I got to tell you that, but I'm excited for this. The energy feels real good.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we made it through. We're here.
We made it. We're here.
Right.
So tell us a little bit more about your business and what you do.
Yeah, so backstory, I'm a clinical dentist. So that means I've been doing dentistry for 38 years or so. I had a dental surgical practice. I can tell you more about that in a moment if you wish, but in Syracuse, New York. Sold that in 2021, finished patients up in 2022. And then my wife and I moved to our homes in Florida and Montana. And I always have been involved in the business side, coaching dentists, more of in a mastermind type group because my practice was too busy to really have a second business in addition to that. So once we moved there, I refocused all my energies into the coaching business, which is called Ultimate Success in Dentistry. And that's been awesome. Great. It's a great journey. You know, the practice that I had, our mantra was changing people's lives one smile at a time. And so the thought behind that, rather than being cliche like, was we were really doing full mouth surgical reconstruction of people who had, really, it's not really said this way, but they really had true dental disabilities. They were so ashamed of their smile, they'd cover their mouth, put their hands over their mouth, wouldn't take pictures, wouldn't go out in public. The idea of reinventing themselves after a relationship breakup, it's like, I can't do that. Or just plain eating, like if a friend's going to invite me over, I know she's going to serve that meal. I can't eat it. So I'll say no. And to take folks in that and have them go and just like have a totally new lease on life is just so rewarding. And so now I help dentists basically on the business side, who have all that skill set, but are just struggling with how do I put it together? So I have a team that supports that, the marketing supports that, the sales process supports that. And with the end goal being that, patients can make that very large investment of time and money and emotion in themselves to just truly change their lives. So I can live vicariously through these dentists that are just doing more and more and more of this kind of work. So it's awesome.
Oh, that's awesome. That sounds like such a great journey too. And okay, I want to unpack that a little bit. So Tell me a little bit about building the practice. I mean, I know that we're kind of condensing this for purposes of a podcast, but that sounds like there was some learning and some growth to get to that point of busyness and then selling it ultimately. What was that journey like? Yeah,
sure. How would I say? Painfully slow. Because because it was all like any business, it's never going to grow any bigger than the owner or the person that's running it. If the owner totally steps aside and lets another team maybe run it in every sense, and the owner doesn't get in the way. But in a smaller business, I think many times the owner is the key to the speed at which and the height at which that business goes to, for sure. In mine, that was the case. And I think that my initial thought, because of the dentist that I met when I first came out of school, was that if you get really good clinically, you become a clinical master, whatever that looks like, then everything else takes care of itself. And of course, that's a lie. It just doesn't work that way.
It's a Kevin Costner movie. If you build it, they will not come. Sorry.
That's exactly right. Yes, they may come, but they may turn around and go away. And so, but that took me, I don't know, the first like 2 decades, probably. We were in one state. My wife wanted to move to a different state, so we relocated states. So that took a while to stop and restart. Wow. Most of the patients don't follow you when you go from New England to a middle New York state. So you start over. And it was all good. It was a very healthy, great move. But at the end of that, somewhere around that, into the second decade maybe of that work, I was learning other things. I love learning, and it started to become apparent that that the business side had a lot of interest to me as well. And plus that was really where the key of our next leap or next growth was going to come from. So then it was, I really wished that had access to, or I found, a coach type person, like somebody, that like I am to people in the sense like, well, I've done it. I have everything to gain by you succeeding, and let's do it really fast because there's no reason to do it slow. But I didn't have that. But at the same point in time, I had lots of great, there's lots of great resources and books and all that kind of information is out there. So we just kind of piece at a time. And how do you put together a team that wants to be there, engaged team? I got better at figuring that out. Become a leader in myself. Nobody's going to follow somebody unless they're a leader, patience or team. And then on the sales and the marketing, how can we do that? What does that look like for us? More and more became a specialty niche type of an office, and as far as the type of work we were doing and the scope of the work we were doing. So yeah, that was it was a fun journey, and I guess it was nice in a sense that when I decided I wanted to leave the practice of dentistry, it was still growing. I was still learning. I was still going to the top of my game, so to speak. So it's nice to leave at that point, as opposed to people saying you probably should have left a few years ago.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of following that strategy too. Like I worked for a big name marketer, like celebrity marketer, think Tony Robbins, but for online businesses. Yeah. And I left that when they were like, I turned in my notice and they kept giving me project work after that so that I could stay working with the team in some capacity. And at one point I had to be like, guys, we gotta call it. We gotta be done. And when people asked me why I did that, especially when they were like, we'll keep you on with contract work, I was like, yeah, it was one of those things where I could feel it shifting inside me. And I didn't really want to do that work anymore, but I loved the people and I didn't want that relationship to burn when my apathy ultimately kicked in and I stopped doing as good a job as I normally would. So like leave on a high note. I'm a big fan of that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And the space that I went into, I was excited about that too. I mean, they're night and day in the sense that, clinical dentistry, it's, I don't know if a patient outside would think about it, but, for me, it'd be like, patient goes to sleep at 8:00 in the morning and at 1:00, you're still bent over the same patient working. That physically there's a little bit of a gruel to that. But the biggest piece probably, is the obvious is it's a brick and mortar type business. So you have to be there. And when you're not there, that thing called overhead is saying, feed me, feed me, feed me. And so that compare that to, becoming a coach where, you can coach from anywhere, anywhere really, so that's great. So you have that freedom of having it fit into your life all the time, as opposed to looking at and saying, how do we, my office, we closed the office 12 to 14 weeks a year. So there was a lot of time that everybody was off. But even with that, there's still another, 40 weeks a year where you got to be there. You can't be someplace else. And so that was part of just a lifestyle change of incorporating that into our lifestyle. My wife and I, it's great. Yeah. So it's perfect. It's just the right time. Yep.
Oh, I love that. And I'm curious about this because this is how I had to learn it too. Did you find when you wanted to free up more space in your calendar that you had to claim the space first? Or did you ever get to a point where the space just kind of naturally opened up from the changes that you were putting in place?
Oh yeah, that's definitely the former. Yeah, you don't schedule it; it doesn't happen. whatever that is, if it's a certain procedure, if it's a certain time off, a certain course, it's like forget it. You got to schedule.
I suspected that was the case, but I'm hoping that one day somebody surprises me. But like the takeaway for anybody listening here is that if you want something to change, you have to block it out on your calendar and you have to make it important. Right. Otherwise, the work will fill up every available moment if you let it. You can't let it.
That's so true, Angie. That is so true.
And I think what's really interesting to me in all of this, I've spoken to over 100 business owners since I started this. And when I started the show, I really thought that I was going to focus exclusively on creative service providers, writers, photographers, things like that. But I've noticed this incredible overlap with literally every business that I've spoken to. You're one of, I think, 5 dentists that I've spoken to so far. But I hear that same thing that like I have to be present. I have to show up on like my background is in marketing and copy. So I have to
Yeah.
show up on these calls. I have to be present at meetings. I have to do the work. Nobody else is going to do this work for me in my business.
Right.
And it's interesting to hear so many parallels, although I am curious because I never realized until you said it. It's such an obvious thing that you don't think about, the physicality of literally having to work in this tiny space, in this limited position of movement. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
All of my
Yep.
gratitude to the dentists that have helped me over the years.
Yeah. Well, yes. Of course, it's, the dentist, the assistants, the hygienist, not necessarily the front desk, because that's more of a administrative computer type position, but yeah, they're all, bending over the exact same repetitive motion things, all those kind of things that then creep up on you after a certain number of years of doing that repetitive type work. It takes its toll on lots of folks. Yeah, for sure. You see a lot of hunched over dentists walking around, Angie. When you start looking at it, you're like, oh, dentist, must be a dentist. Or a hygienist or an assistant. That's got to be what it is.
And then on top of that, to be, I imagine that a lot of the people that you work with are resistant or fearful or scared or nervous when they get into your chair. I mean, I wouldn't say that I'm like, hey, let's get in the chair, like happy to go to the dentist, but I know that I'm pretty easygoing about it. I imagine not everybody's that way.
I think that was part of our niche. Then the actual name of the practice was gentle dentistry, Ballinsville Gentle Dentistry. And I always found there are so many little tiny things that you can do just physically, little tiny things you can do to make it so much easier on people. And I always, what I certainly found was true is that the biggest thing, this is one person's opinion, but with a lot of research and thought behind it, is that the hardest part for people going to the dentist is embarrassment and being judged. And so if they can go someplace and either have somebody tell you like, really, no, like these guys aren't, you're not going to feel judged. If you feel judged, it's you judging yourself. It's not words or things they're doing, because they're just like there to help you. And we got really good about just being as pure to that as we could. We just be empathetic. Like, we all have our shortcomings in our lives, and it just happens to be theirs is dentistry, but we all have stuff that we wouldn't want pushed around, but they can't send their mail order. They have to show up, And so
I'd just like to take this off for a day.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So you have to accompany it. Therefore, you're going to be judged because your teeth are coming with you. And so when you got rid of that, people looked at it and said, like, these people are truly, listening to me. They're paying attention to me. They're coming up with a plan that's specific for me, and it makes sense why it's right or wrong and so forth. That I think that just maybe because our process involved, I don't know, 2 or 3 hours at least, where a person was in the chair before anything was put in their mouth. We're just talking and gathering information and let's figure out something together. That probably for many folks, that was enough where they looked at it and said, at some level, at least I want to trust these people. Whether I can or not, I don't know. But at least I want to trust them because I'm getting a good feeling of that. So that was our objective. And to a large degree, we were successful. And I think that's probably why so many people ultimately said, okay, I want you guys to help me out. So
I love that. It makes a huge difference. I know that there was, it was last year. It was 2022. I'm a digital nomad and I travel around from different places. I've been on the family farm for a while working on my book, but normally I'm on the road just visiting different places. And I was in Vegas when I woke up one morning with not excruciating pain, but just a little bit in the jaw, to the point where I was like, I don't like that. And I don't want it to get worse. So I'm just going to go ahead and schedule an appointment today with a dentist. I called around to a few highly rated places and wound up at one on the mother of bad mornings. So, oh my gosh, I walked into this office in a mood. My car battery was dead because I stupidly left the lights on. I was surprised by my Airbnb host sending over an electrician at 8 o'clock in the morning without telling me when I'm on my way out the door to this emergency dental appointment. I met with one of those, it's going to sound so random, Honda Civic drivers are like the chihuahuas of drivers. Like if you do something to offend them, they will just attack like psychotically. So there was a light that was out and I was trying to get into a left turn lane and nobody was letting me in. So I pulled out my intertext and was like, all right, signal is on. That is my space. And I pissed off a Civic driver who pursued me for miles, flashing his lights and trying to run me off the road. That was the mood that I walked into the dentist's office. And I found like they were there. They were in such a great mood. I sat in the chair. There was a TV on the ceiling and I was like,
Sure.
oh, great. Like, I don't feel compelled to like talk with your fingers in my mouth, like that Ricky Gervais talking animal.
Sure.
And they took such good care of me. And I was like, I don't have dental insurance. How do we work this out? So they helped me figure out a price that was affordable. And it just so happened that I picked a place that could do, it turned out I had cracked a molar. So they could do all of the stuff in-house same day if I was willing to wait. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is just, thank you so much for taking care of me and for making this a great experience on a day when I was about this far away from biting people's heads off that didn't deserve it. All of that from a dentist's office. That's fantastic. Like,
yeah, isn't
it? I don't know why I felt compelled to share that story, but that was my experience with it. So
yeah, that's great. Well, not everybody has a good dentist story, so we need to get that on the air.
Yes, that is so true. And it was interesting to me, like you mentioned a couple of things that I want to unpack. One was this, taking a business to another place and having to start over, and the fact that you can't take your people with you. I think that's one thing that holds a lot of entrepreneurs back, especially people that do have physical locations, this idea of having to rebuild and how much work that would be. What ultimately like swayed you toward that and made the move worth it in the end, or was it?
Well, yes, either that or I'd have no family. So it was actually pretty easy, Angie. given the choices we have in life, we had just moved. My wife grew up in the city of Syracuse. I was doing a hospital residency program. She was working in the same hospital. We met and got to know each other at a romantic level, but nothing serious. I bought a practice in New Hampshire. She was looking for a change of place, so she moved to Vermont. We stayed in touch. Eventually, got married, had some young kids, and at some point, she said, "This small town isn't enough for me. I want to get back around my family." And so, we talked about it a lot, and it just was like she just couldn't get herself happy in that place and missed her family too much. So, it's like, okay, so it just makes sense, but at the same time, what you can't take from somebody, for instance, so I bought a practice there. Had some success with that, whatever that looked like. But when you go to the new place, like all that success, it's all in your head. It's on paper, but it's all in your head. So you don't have to reinvent that part. You can just take that. And so you're hitting the ground running way faster than you did before. So it's not like you have to repeat the process. And sometimes, the new location can even have, there are things about Syracuse that I left there for a reason. I went to another place for a reason. But there, from a business standpoint, there's things about Syracuse that would make it easier to thrive in a business, perhaps, than it might someplace else. For instance, a smaller town like we moved to. So no, I had no regrets. That it's like one of those. I don't know if people think about. I think about it a lot. You say like, well, what would you have done if you stayed there? And be like, how would you know if I didn't stay? It's like all you can do is take wild guesses of what would have happened, but there's no way of knowing what would have happened. So you don't even think about it; you just go.
Amen. Louder for those of us who obsessively plan and wonder about all of the different paths that we could be taking. Like for those of us in the back that are overthinking the hell out of this, louder for them. You can't know what the road looked like that you didn't take. And so you can't build that up in your head to be something that it wasn't, because you have no idea. It could have been better. It could have been exactly the same. Could have been a hell of a lot worse. You're on the path that you're on.
Right. Yep. Just go forward. Right. Don't look over your shoulder. Yeah. I mean, stupid little things, right? I mean, you missed the semi that got out of control coming down the hill because you weren't there to be in that road. It's like, you wouldn't think, I mean, I don't think about that stuff, but life that always has stuff you can't predict. So don't try to predict it. Just go.
Oh yeah. That's kind of the state that I'm in. I find myself at the business events that I go to, usually being the driver of some sort, usually carting people around in my rental car for whatever reason. And it could be because I'm the daughter of two truck drivers, but it also could be because I refuse to road rage. And I just trust if I got caught in traffic, cool, that probably is preventing me from being in a place where that, car is barreling down the road and I would have been in the path. Like, we're just going to trust.
That's right. That's all you can do.
Well, and I was hoping that you would say something like that, but of course I never ask. I never know when I ask the question what the conversation is going to be like. But you mentioned that you're not technically starting over from absolute zero. And I think that's the part that we miss so much in these entrepreneurial conversations, that like if you make a big choice like this, where technically you would have to be starting over and doing something new in a new place with new customers, you could build so much faster because you don't have to figure these things out all over again. You've got a good baseline of what success looks like and an idea of how to get there. So you can build a lot faster the second time around and maybe even improve on some things from the first time around. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And of course, the biggest in my journey, everybody's journey, there is that technical know-how for sure, but there's no question the biggest thing is just your mindset about success. So if you looked at and said, even if you limit yourself and say, limit yourself by some sort of easily measured metric, which isn't necessarily a mindset thing, but we'll say, so if you said, oh, well, my income was this. Well, my income, what was your income out of school? Well, it wasn't that big. Okay. So we're starting at a higher expected income. What was the revenue in the business? Well, the day one in the new business is zero. First year. So after X number of years, it was higher, right? Yep. Well, then you're starting in your mind, like that's the number you kind of expect. Like anything less than that, your deserve level says, no, you're better than this. And that alone will push you to that point. So it is the technical part for sure. But, it's always the mindset that's going to just like warp speed you to an amazing place, or it's going to keep you nailed to the ground,
Oh, yes, absolutely. And it was interesting because I just finished writing a book, and we were talking before we started recording about your book that's going to come out. We're going to give people a link to that at the end of the show.
Yeah, sure.
But while I was doing research, that same old scary stat popped up about how many businesses fail when they first start. It was something like 18% of businesses survive beyond the first however many years. And that's a scary stat to somebody that's doing this for the first time, or maybe working up the courage to try again the second time after a failure happened. I know that happened to me. My first experience freelancing was an abject failure. Yeah. But the funny part to me when I came across that article was that stat, while widely cited, is also incomplete, because they spoke to the same thing that you just mentioned, which is, but subsequent ventures started by those entrepreneurs that failed the first time tend to find success at much more exponential and faster rates, because they're learning with every failure. They're learning what to improve, and they're iterating. So it's interesting to me that stat popped into my mind. I was like, yep, here we go. Seeing it all over again.
Sure. And I think too, it's great to have all this mindset inside yourself, but there's no question in my journey, the further I journeyed, the more I was able to put together a community of people who were doing the same. And you could separate yourself from the naysayers that were like, well, if mine's going to fail, yours will fail too, as opposed to those who are like, yeah, well, I'm whatever, mine's struggling, but it's better than it was, or I'm moving forward, I'm doing this and doing that, so the more you can surround, put a bubble around your brain and say, okay, I'm just going to talk to people that expect to succeed. I'm not going to talk to people that expect to get divorced. Like, why would I have people like that? I'll talk to people that want to have a successful marriage and people that want to have a successful business. And the other folks, I'll just try to give them a little pass maybe for now.
Yeah. With all the love I have, don't project your shit on me. Like, that's right. Your experience is not universal, but I appreciate the love and concern that I know that you're coming from, or I'm going to assume that you're coming from, because I'm going to assume the best, right?
Right. Yeah.
That's so great. And that ties into another thing that I wanted to bring up that you mentioned earlier, which was coaching. Because I know that I experienced some skepticism and some resistance towards coaching in the beginning, because I had a lot of head trash around people trying to take advantage of me and like, oh, this is the teacher can't do, so they teach kind of scenario. But since then, I've come to learn that while, yes, there are some outliers in every industry. I mean, there's bad writers, there's bad dentists, there's bad actors everywhere, right? Sure. If you go into this with a sense of, here's the problem that I'm trying to solve, and I know somebody out there can help me, odds are you're going to find somebody that can help you shortcut the process. And I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that, other than I want to destroy this idea, especially this like American exceptionalism, capitalism type idea of it's only worth it if I suffered and struggled through it on my own and I didn't need any damn help.
But that's never true, right?
It's never
know,
true.
I
There's
mean,
not one single successful entrepreneur or even entrepreneurs that weren't so successful that I've
right.
met that got anywhere without help.
I mean, somebody someplace invented this microphone that I'm talking to you
Yeah.
with. So it's like, yeah, I mean, we're always standing on the hands or the arms or the shoulders of giants before us that allow us to go the next step further if we choose. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
no, you're absolutely right. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of silly. Well, I don't know. I mean, there's a book called Soar with Your Strengths, which is kind of related to this. And it, really kind of talks about if you like, it maybe comes from a faith standpoint, but if you believe that everybody has certain strengths and gifts in them, which I certainly do, and
Me
and
too.
our and this particular book looks at schools and says, school says, well, if you're getting a B plus, A minus in math, we'll leave that alone. If you get a C minus D in social studies, well, we'll work on social studies.
Mm-hmm.
And this book would say, well, why would we do that? I mean, we're trying to make everybody mediocre and average. Why not take the A minus person, turn them into absolute mathematical genius because they probably like it and they're good at it, and
Yeah.
then make the social studies good enough so it doesn't get in the way of the math. And to me, that
I
just
love that.
it makes so much sense. It's like, why don't we do that with everything? Why do we? But anyway, I'm guilty of myself, I'm sure, in some way or another. So to that point, if you looked at it and said, well, if I have this amazing gift and I can hook up with this person, that person's just going to accelerate that A minus into an A plus into a da da da. Well, then that's good for the world because I may come up with some ideas that I wouldn't have otherwise that can help somebody else on their leg.
Yes.
So,
and you're operating in your zone of genius to things that feel good, that are probably easy for you, but are not easy for other people. Like that's the
right.
thing that drives me the most nuts about this is that I see so many talented people that are down on themselves because they fall for the marketing messaging, right? And I don't mean that in a derogatory, haha, you got fooled sense,
Yep.
but the marketing convinces you that you're missing something. You might not be missing something. It might not have to be hard at all because you might have that natural strength that you just talked about. I struggle with that for a long time, and I recently discovered something called the Strengths Finder. I don't know if you've heard about that or not.
Mm-hmm. I have, yes.
I beat myself up and I got beat up a lot for not being very disciplined and for being inconsistent. Ironic,
Yes.
considering we're on a production schedule for a podcast that I've put out for over 140 episodes, right?
Well done, Angie. Yes.
Those were literally out of the 34 strengths that this assessment measured. Consistency and discipline are 33 and 34 for me. Super far down.
Not 110. Not 110 though, Angie. That's good.
That is true. That is true. But it was funny. I noticed that when I was talking to the coach that helped me with this assessment, shout out to Marianne Gramig. I was like, so what is it that allows me to be disciplined and consistent in some areas where in others I completely fall flat? And she goes, well, you leveraged your strengths, your top strengths, which are actually activator, somebody who can bring an idea into reality, and strategy. You leverage those to create a process and a system that allowed you to show up and do the fun part for you, which is talking to people. The rest of this is going to happen with my team and my editor, and I get to show up and do the fun part.
That's
but
right.
that all came through the strengths, which came through asking for help, which came through people approaching me and saying, you should have a podcast. I really like your voice. And me reacting with, well, that's dumb. I don't like my voice. It's weird. And also, I don't know the first thing about doing a podcast. So where would I even start? Oh, go talk to this person, go talk to that person. And all of this, even us just sitting here, is a result of having the courage to admit that I don't know how to do this. And I would rather just ask for somebody's help than try to beat my head against the wall and figure it out by myself. For instance, we met through a site called Podmatch. Shout out to Alex Sanfilippo, put together a fantastic platform. I had this audacious goal to be on 40 podcasts or stages or articles or some combination thereof by the time I turned 40 on December 1st. We're recording this in November. It's going to air in 2024, but you're here, we're traveling back in time to hear me talk in November.
There you go.
And I made that announcement in June. And I want to say about August, I noticed, I'm only like just over 20. And if I don't hit the gas soon, I don't know if I'm going to make it. And I'm not getting responses from the places that I've sent pitches out to, despite the follow-up, and the leads are coming in much slower than they were at the beginning. I don't know if I'm going to make it. And that makes me upset. I need to really ramp up my outreach, but I don't know what to do. So I made a post online about how I was frustrated. And I told a couple people, like, I'm looking to get on more podcasts, but I don't know how to get there. And people suggested Podmatch, and I signed up for that. And I got like instantly booked on a whole lot of shows. They weren't all the best fit for what I was trying to do, but it broke that plateau that I had been at. And I very easily could have fallen into that, well, I'm not going to make it, let's go focus on other things trap. I'm so glad I asked for help. That was the point of that rant.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and your perseverance, right? You said, nope, knock me down, get back up, knock me down, get back up. So well done, Angie.
And then we get to have fantastic conversations like this. Like I'm always delighted. I never know what to expect in conversations like this because it's just fascinating to hear how people in different industries do business, what people have learned. So yes, thank you for allowing me to do this, to geek out over stuff like this.
Thanks for the invitation. I wouldn't be here without you. So you're the master mistress here is leading the way. So good for you. Well done.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, Harry, abrupt segue into, so we talked about the growth of the business. We talked about moving the business and all of the learnings within. Talk to me a little bit more about pivoting into coaching other dentists to build a successful practice. Like what led up to that? I know you mentioned a little bit about the wanting to get more time and more flexibility, but I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah. Well, I was fortunate, I'm still fortunate to be in a mastermind group. There's about maybe 30, 35 dentists or so. And all just an amazing group, just incredibly bright, talented, just awesome group. And we get together quarterly. There's a very talented businessman, thinker, big idea thinker who facilitates it for us. But the idea behind those is people have little clinical questions that are always sidebar. It's all about like, so here's what's going on with my business. How do I do this? How do I do that? All that kind of stuff. And I just really enjoyed those. Every time we had a meet, it's like with positive energy. That was awesome. But the questions and so forth, and the folks in the room were, always very kind, saying like, David, you seem to have the ability to take these complex issues, boil them down to simple little steps and actionable steps that I could do Monday. And so that that felt good, getting that feedback from peers. And so I at the end of the clinical part, I looked at it and said, well, I had success in my own business. And part of what I noticed on my clinical journey to, getting those advanced skills, and it's so easy, maybe easy in the sense that it's so available to get those skills today in these courses. And so there are many students in there that I would meet them and I'd be so intimidated by how just the vernacular, the scope of what they would know and all this kind of stuff. And we might get talking over a lunch break or something. And like, so like, you're doing this stuff like all day long, right? And they'd be like, no, once in a while. It's like, so like, how did you choose not to do it all day long? I was like, well, insurance doesn't pay for it, or this, that, or people are this, or and all these excuses. And so, I just kept hearing more and more, and I thought, man, it's such a shame because, at whatever level of ability I have, we were very successful at helping lots of folks get yes and getting very good results. They're just delighted. Mm-hmm. And these people should be doing the same or more because they just are more gifted, and it wasn't happening. And I saw it in lots of different scenarios. And so I, kind of looked at that and said, well, we were able to do it in my office. I seem to have some ability to help people not in my office through this mastermind that I've been in for 6, 7, 8 years. So if I marry those two, then I could do something that feels really significant. I'm helping one person at a time. I don't want to sit in front of 1,000 people and talk about something conceptually for a few hours and walk away. Mm-hmm. I want to really hold somebody by the hand, so to speak. Okay, first steps, let's talk every week. Let's see what they're going to do. How did that work out? What's next step? Really kind of, lay it out, fast track it. Which is exactly what we're doing. And so I think that, it just made sense. The part that didn't make sense was, in my mind, it was like, well, and I mean, everybody has an ego. I would say mine's intact, but you wouldn't probably notice it. And so, the idea of people just coming to me in the mastermind, people just came to me, said, Dave, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And of course, my office, everybody goes to the doctor and says, well, whatever that is. So, but when I wasn't in that space, nobody came to me because they don't know me. Like, why would I go talk to David? He's not a coach. He's never been a coach. He's never been a consultant. He's a below the radar type guy. So, and so the idea of like writing a manual or like, he was like, I don't want to write a manual. And some of my friends said, you would never want to write a manual. You know what it'd take to write, 200-300 pages? Like, that's just horrible.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I hired a coach to teach me how to coach. And he said, well, you're going to need a manual. And I said, why? So he said, well, you got something deliverable. I mean, I know you had great success and it looks good on paper and it's great talking to you. Obviously, you know what you're doing. But I'm telling you, if you don't have something to give people, like, they're just going to be like, why would I pay you any amount of money, much less a considerable amount of money? So anyway, he convinced me. So, 400, 500, 600 pages later, okay, the manual's done. Then same coach says, well, people really, you got something, but they still don't know you. If you may feel about the same way, Angie, about your book. If you want to be an expert in your field, you won't find an expert in any field, true expert, that hasn't written a book. It's like, that's just part of being seen as an expert. So you're going to need to write a book. So the first part of the year, I thought, well, I got time. I'm not practicing anymore. I'm in a new house, so forth. So I got, things are it's done, it's a brand new house. So, okay. So actually I wrote 2 books. I didn't tell you the second one. So I wrote 2 books. One I sent to the publisher. The other I'm just going to self-publish myself. I'm just finishing that up now. And some of the other stuff that I said, I'll never do podcasts. Why would I do a podcast? I don't want to do a podcast. So like, this is whatever, I don't know, another 30 or 35, and I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. So some of the process has been fun. Just, I use that word loosely, fun. Reinventing myself in a different space. But it gives me such a great appreciation, for the folks that are starting out a business on their own. It's like back in my other business, it was so entrenched the success that as long as we paid attention to it, kept doing things, stay current, keep them on top of marketing. It's like, it was a rolling big snowballs rolling along. Whereas a new venture like this is like, no, there's no snow here at all. We're just trying to get a little snowball here so we can push it on the ground. So, so it's fun.
There were so many great things that you said in that I want to unpack a little bit. Like this idea of reinvention, I think like we've got a lot of subtext and baggage attached to that concept. It often feels like we have to burn it down to the ground and completely rebuild, which we've already established is not a thing that you need to do. Right. So like if we're approaching this from ease, from simplicity, from leaning into our strengths, from leaning into our passions, you said the perfect thing that I want people to take away from this and pay attention to. Listen for people that are coming up to you and paying compliments and asking questions with nothing to gain from saying that. Those are signals that I always love to pay attention to. That's what got me to start the podcast. Like I had a number of people at different events, unrelated to it, didn't know each other, all came up and said the same thing independently of each other. And I went, maybe there's something here. Yeah. And so you had the same thing. People that come up to you and say, oh, well, this is a thing that and you start to put together. Not only is this a thing that I have to value, even though I'm looking at folks and going, this is intimidating. Like, I can't teach you anything. I can't work with it. I'm here to learn from you. I've had that experience with so many of my mentors and colleagues where I'm over in my corner talking about, I can't contribute to this conversation because look at all these brilliant people over here. And they're thinking the same thing about me.
Yeah. I wish Angie would come over and join us so she could drop some pearls on us, huh?
Yeah, like this intimidation factor. A lot of the time, the other people that you are comparing yourself to are feeling the exact same thing about you or other people in the room. So at least there's that universal sense that like, do I really know what I'm doing? Why would people talk to me about that? And that ties in perfectly to what you said about building a reputation. I feel like a lot of us feel this pressure to kind of go out and Facebook ads and build a community and build a following and all of that stuff. And on the one hand, what you said about building authority with a book is totally accurate. I used to think that was complete and utter bullshit by people who are trying to sell books. Yeah. But having worked on this thing for the better part of 5 years and realizing how hard it is to bring these ideas into the world, at least it was for me. I'm not going to say that's universal, but not everybody's going to do that because it's hard work. So I absolutely understand that the people that get to the finish line and publish a book are an authority. That was a lot of work, and that's a labor of love sometimes.
Yes, indeed.
But that ties perfectly. Like I remember early in my copywriting career, that I was experiencing some challenges with the clients that I was working with who were constantly arguing with me. And I don't say that in a sense of like, Angie's right, how dare you argue with me? But like, clearly something is disconnecting if you hired me for a thing and then everything I recommend you argue against, like something has broken here. And I remember talking, I was frustrated. I'm venting to one of my friends, and we happened to be at a conference for copywriters. And they just point blank asked me, Angie, why are you working so hard to build your reputation with people who have no idea what you can do and what you're capable of, and they don't know your skills, versus continuing to lean into the people on the other side of that door right there who know exactly who you are and what your skills are and what you bring to the table? And that was like, God, I love having people like that in your corner that will show you how you're kind of thinking in circles and not really moving forward. Because I fired that client. They clearly, we just weren't a good fit, and they didn't see my strategies as viable. So give up on trying to convince them that. Fight a downhill battle. And I got a new client right after that was a perfect fit. And that work was full of ease and joy. And oh my gosh, we had fun brainstorming the ideas. But that was like a long kind of shiny thread ramble. But I think it all connects in such a beautiful way that like this can be easy. You can ask for help. You can pay attention to the people that ask you for help and come up with a brand new offer and a next new stage without feeling this pressure to go into a cave and reinvent yourself.
That's very well said. I like that. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Oh my goodness.
The idea of going back, the other side of the door. That's a very good. Yeah, I think that's a very good picture. I can see that clearly.
You've already got people in your life, no matter what stage of business that you're at, that know you and know your potential. And just like you said earlier with the putting a bubble around your brain and the people that just don't get it, you can ignore the people that just don't get it. You can love them from a distance and not invite them to join you on the business journey. And then just go play in the sandbox with the people that get what you're trying to build, and will build you up along the way. We're here. I promise. We're all here. David's here. I'm here. We're here.
Right. That's true. You're absolutely right. Yep.
Oh my gosh. I just looked down and realized we're coming up against time. So I'm going to say, I want to keep going. We're going to have to book in another two another episode to talk about this, because I love this. Tell us more about your businesses, where we can learn about you. Drop the links. Tell us about the book. I want it all.
Oh, okay. Sure. Yeah. So the no particular order, the book is called Peak Success, an Entrepreneurial Guide to Business Prosperity. You can get it on Amazon. I think at the end of this week, first part of next week, it's available on Amazon. And then website is called name of the business is called Ultimate Success in Dentistry. The website, a little different, so you have to listen to it. It's ultimatesuccess.dentist. There's no com or order in that. Ultimatesuccess.dentist. Nice. And then the second book has a phrase, and I'll leave you lingering on this, a phrase called 4M40. So there's another website called 4m40.com, which takes you to the website and the second book, ebook, and so forth. And then the social stuff, LinkedIn is usual /David-R-Pearce-DDS. But really, if you just go to the website, there's all kinds of information there, and some giveaways and so forth that way. It's current and fun. And so, yeah, that's the easiest way. I'm easy to find.
Well, and it's going to be even easier because we're going to make sure that there are clickable links in the show notes. Super easy for people to reach out and connect. Thank you so much. This was such a great conversation to happen today. Lots of energy, lots of lessons. I love it. Thank you.
Thank you, Angie.
That's all for now. If you want to keep that kick-ass energy high, please take a minute to share this episode with someone that might need a high-octane dose of "you can do it." Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the Permission to Kick-Ass podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you stream your podcasts. I'm your host, Angie Coley, and I'm here rooting for you. Thanks for listening, and let's go kick some ass.